So hi everyone. Hi, I see you guys. My name is Silindile, and today I'm just going to be talking to you about property stokvels and how we can really create wealth for the collective by using a property stokvel. Basically what a property stokvel is, we all know what stokvels are. It's just basically a group of people coming together with the common objective, whatever that may be. So where they're saving funds towards that objective. Traditionally, they've been used more towards your groceries and your funeral expenses and purchasing big ticket items, or just helping each other out from a financial perspective. But the wave is changing, and property stokvels are now becoming more, stokvels in general are becoming more sophisticated, and they're moving away from being sort of like consumer focused and more about wealth creation and more about savings and investments for the long term instead of them being for the short term. So in terms of who I am, like I said, my name is Lindile, and I'm the founder and chairperson of Sakisizwe Property Stokvel. But my journey with stokvels didn't start there. It started from when I was young at home with a mother who was a serial stokveler, who was involved in like a number of stokvels, from grocery ones to just her being with her friends. My mom was a teacher, so they always wanted something or the other, but in order to avoid debt, they would enter stokvels that would then allow them to purchase those items for each other, which was like, it was a sense of community in a way. So that was what I grew up in, that kind of scenario where I understood the power of stokvels. Because even at varsity, I knew that my registration fees, for example, will come because it would be my mother's turn to get paid, and then that's how she would pay the registration cost and all of that. So that was really the way I started with stokvels. But when I started working, we were all like, oh, okay, let's start stokvels, guys, for traveling or for groceries or for just helping each other. But I'm like, guys, no, I get it. But for me, it just didn't make sense to just put money together only to then just distribute it. At least if we were working towards building an asset or something like that, then it would make more sense. So I was never really interested in the whole stokvel thing, like when I started working. But where actually the concept made sense to me was when I saw a Facebook post the other day. Someone was saying, there's so many of us. If only so many of us can pop up 1,000 rand, after 5 years, we could have so much money. And I was like, wow, that's actually a very good point, because I had already started buying, like investing in property, because I've got like my primary residence and I had like a couple of rental units. But I thought, oh, that's actually quite amazing, because if we could do this as a collective, we could actually be able to afford more properties than what I was doing on my own. So I got my friends and I convinced my friends at the time, like, guys, let's start a property stokvel, let's do this. So we did that, right? Which was in 2018. So we started saving money. We're like, okay, guys, let's do this. We're gonna buy our properties, blah, 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 blah. We got together, and then we managed to convince even our other friends and colleagues, whatever the case was. And we really grew from just the three of us. And then we became like, because we wanted it to remain really small. So we're like, okay, we're gonna max it up to 10 members, and that's it. And so we raised the money and all of that, and it was just this fascinating idea, having like this ladies property stokvel, yada yada yada. So our challenge came when we actually were supposed to now start buying the properties. We had raised the money, because in like a year we raised like 400,000 rand, which was not bad. But now our challenge was, okay, now where do we find the properties? Like, how do we start? Because all of us were studying. I was studying, I was doing my MBA at the time. My other friends were also studying. They had kids, they had businesses, they had lives, basically. So our challenge was, how do we actually find properties as a group? How do we manage it? How do we do all of that? And that is when I started going online and finding, like, how can we do this? Because I could tell that we really wanted to invest, but we wanted to be more like passive investors and not be out there, just logging away, looking for property, dealing with tenants, dealing with maintenance, because we had other stuff to do. So that is where then I came across Taurai and Reta. I started like going on to property related events and pages, and just finding out more, because I wanted really for us to do this right when we're doing it. So that is how our paths then crossed with Taurai and Reta. And I found out how they're doing and how they partner with investors and all of that. So anyway, one thing led to another, and we ended up coming up with the concept of Sakisizwe Property Stokvel, because he was saying that they have property deals, but they don't have investors. And here we were as investors, but we didn't have the deals. So it was like, the perfect marriage of those two, us solving each other's problems, right? So we started then Sakisizwe last year towards the end of June. So we've been going since then, and really we've grown in leaps and bounds since then. Having just over 120 members now. We've raised just over 2.6 million rand, and we've invested in various properties like in Joburg, Durban, Cape Town, and all of that. And our concept in terms of how we were investing in property. I actually submitted that for the Investor of the Year last year, and we actually won under the innovative category. So we really have grown a lot in the period, and we've learned a lot as well, because the way that we were running our stokvel with the ladies is very different to how Sakisizwe is operating. So it's been a steep learning curve for me. And so in all of that, I've just been really, really blessed to have an amazing team that I've worked with, and we've just we've got a never say die attitude, and we just keep on breaking down the walls and doing what we can to achieve. So the reason why I'm really here today is to inspire you guys and to show you that there's nothing special about me, there's nothing special about what we do, and that it's just all about having that vision and just buckling down and getting it done. Because all you need to start a stokvel is just one other person to buy into the idea and to say, yes, let's do it. Because if you're one, you're just doing it by yourself. But as soon as you've got another person, you become accountable. And that is why stokvels actually work. It's because of that accountability element, where someone else is looking up to you to be able to help achieve the common goal. So that's the premise behind it. So stokvels are big in South Africa. It's about 49 billion rand industry. It's about and most of the beneficiaries of that is mostly like your big retailers, your Boxers, your Macros, and all of that. And so it's not really focused towards investment, but like I said in the beginning, that's where the trend is going. We are working towards changing that, but at the moment it's that. And I think the idea is to actually move away from the being like informal grocery burial type stokvels and more towards like business orientated. And I think so part of the reason that maybe the stokvels are not where they should be is that they're paper based, they're informal, and so they just lack that business element. Because I mean, with for 9 billion rand, the stokvel industry could potentially own even a couple of companies in the JSE if you think about it that way. So what should they rather be concentrating on? What should we be putting in place to make sure that we create stokvels that are sustainable and built for the future? We need to make sure that we've got formalized structures. We need to make sure that we operate as a business. We've got those structures in place that enable us to operate as a business, and we've got that business mindset, and we understand that we're not doing this for fun, but we're doing this to build a business and a sustainable business. I always make the example to say, there's no much of a difference in terms of how stokvels, if done correctly, could not be the likes of like a Coronation or an Ellen Gray, because all they are just, in my very humble opinion, sophisticated stokvels, because you've got people that you put in charge to manage the contributions of the group and then disperse the dividends once those collections have been actually raised. So all it is just a crowdfunding mechanism, and then the asset class is shares. It could be that in our instance, our asset class is property, but in other stokvels, it could be the asset class is shares. So there's not much more. You just need to make sure that you're running it efficiently. And then obviously, in order to grow, you need to use technology and embrace technology, because it just makes it easier. Because, for example, we are 120 members plus, and there's just no way that we would be able to manage this had we not embraced technology. From the way we communicate, from the way we deal with sign-ups and collecting contributions, making payments, doing all of that, it would be an absolute nightmare if we were doing this manually or on paper. Using stuff like having Zoom meetings when we need to meet with the members, because our members are from all over the country. And just today we onboarded a lady from Namibia, so if we even going beyond South African borders, so it would really be a case of we would not be able to do this without technology. So I think stokvels need to be able to embrace it, embrace the technology. So, Old Mutual last year did a survey for their annual savings and investment report. For last year, they focused on property stokvels. So, if you want to get the actual report, you can go online and get the details. So when I was still part of my previous stokvels, we were actually one of the stokvels that were interviewed, one of the property stokvels that were interviewed as part of that research. So what that research actually revealed was that stokvels were growing in popularity, and that the average contribution was around 2,000 rand. So you can see they're a little bit on the pricey side, whereas some of the other stokvels maybe it's like 100 rand or 200. So property stokvels are a bit more expensive, and you can understand why. I mean, the average property price in South Africa is about 900,000 rand. So depending on what the goal is of the stokvel, it will take you a while to get to 900,000 if you're putting in 100 rand a month or something along those lines. So that is why then the average contribution from the group of stokvels that they interviewed came to about 2,000 rand. And it actually revealed that 89% of the participants were women. I don't know, might have skewed the results a bit because we're all ladies, but so that it actually shows that even in our communities, it's mostly women that are into stokvels. And funny enough, even like the recent research has shown that it's women that are buying property. So it only makes sense that if women are buying more property and stokvels are mostly women, then the stokvel, the property stokvel market would mostly be made of females. But anyway, not that we're excluding the gentlemen, this was just what the survey actually revealed. So the average age for stokvels was around 35 to 49. This is about just over half of the people that were interviewed, and the average size was about 10 members as well. And the largest stokvel that they actually interviewed had raised 24 million rand in 5 years. 24 million. That's really, really a big amount to raise in like such a short period of time. And, so kudos to whichever that stokvel was that they interviewed last year that had raised that much money in like a 5-year period. So one of the outcomes that one of the lead researchers from the stokvel, from that research, Lynette Nicholson, this is a quote from her. She said, "What started as an alternative saving method outside of formal financial systems is today a significant force." So we are a significant force, guys. I mean, the fact that Old Mutual dedicated their resources to go and find out what's the story with these property stokvels, they obviously see the potential, and they want to know how they can, get a piece of the action. And I know some of the other banks as well are looking into how can they partner with property stokvels. So this is really something that if you want to get started, it really is worth pursuing and see what you can do about it. So property crowdfunding is not, so maybe in South Africa it's still fairly new, but globally not so much. So if you go online, you can look at companies like Fundrise, and the other one is Cadone Capital, which is basically run by Grant Cadone, and Property Mogul. So those are the three big ones in the state that you can go and have a look at how they operate, have a look at their business model, and see that it's actually possible to crowdfund property and to run it properly. So it's like a similar concept to what we're doing with property stokvels. We are crowdfunding for the purposes of investing. So what is it that you require in order to set up your property stokvel for success, right? So the first thing is to have very clear objectives in your vision. What are you trying to achieve? Because stokvels are different, and each of them will have their own objectives. For example, it could be that the members want to buy each other their own properties, like for example, residential where they're going to be staying, or it could be to invest in particular properties for income. Or it could be that they want to buy building material, or it could be that they want to just save up enough money to be able to buy their own homes. So understand that each property stokvel is going to be different. So find one that is aligned to your goals and what is it that you want to achieve. Because, people just assume when they join a stokvel that it's for buying each other members. Don't assume, ask, find out, get the constitution and understand exactly what is it that this particular stokvel is trying to achieve. And then have a growth mindset. I see someone is excited that there was a stokvel that raised 24 million 5 years. Absolutely. Why not 10 million or 20 million, 30 million? Set your goals big, because when you set your goals low, you almost limit your own growth. So when you say, for example, we were joking around the other day with Dima and Gertrude, the other ladies that helped me with the stock, and we said, we want to have 1 million members. That's like a big, hairy, audacious goal. How are you going to manage 1 million members? But if that's your goal, then even if we miss it, we'll get to 800,000 or 500,000 or whatever the case might be. We don't know. But when your goals are that big, it then challenges you to think about, how can we reach 1 million members? What do we need to do? So absolutely, think big, have a growth mindset, because once you have that, then you think of, how can I achieve that? But if you say, we just want to raise a measly 100,000, it's going to make your brain lazy. Say, I want to raise 1 million, I want to raise 10 million, I want to raise 100 million, I want to raise 1 billion. And then that will then, jog your mind into thinking, okay, how on earth am I going to raise 1 billion? Then that way you start thinking creatively. I mean, Cyril Ramaphosa yesterday came up with 500 billion. Had not had Corona, he wouldn't have, that solution would have been possible. But the minute you start telling your mind, this is the amount of money I need, you will find a way to make that happen. So like I've already said, embrace technology. It's going to make your life a whole lot easy. Leverage partnerships, understand yourself and your skills, and say, this is what I know and this is what I don't know. Like I was telling you guys the example that how I myself and Taurai met. We, for example, we could raise the money as a stokvel, so we were strong in fundraising and convincing people to part with their money, but we lack the skills of finding the property and managing it and all of that, to understand. So whereas TJ and them were very good at finding the property and managing it and all of that, but they were not so good at managing crowdfunding and people and all of that. So understand where you are and understand where can you then partner to make sure that you are able to reach your objectives. So you might not necessarily know anything about property. Find someone, either get a coach who's going to help your stokvel to grow, or invest with other partners who are already doing it, because then that way it just makes the learning a lot easier. And then, like I said, treat it as a business. Understand that this is a business. We're going to have income, we're going to have expenses, we're going to have people that we're going to put in charge. The companies have got directors, then that way, if they put your, when you've got your stokvel executives, hold them accountable, compensate them, pay them for their airtime and their traveling and the time that they spend making you guys money. Sometimes in these stokvels, most of the executives are not paid. You just volunteer for years, and that's why some of them, maybe that's why they steal the money, but find a way to compensate them for their time, whether that means reduced fees or in one way, or giving them extra equity in the company, whatever that looks like. But give the people incentive to make sure that they work and they work for you. So like any company, you get auxiliary, you get share options if you're a director or whatever the case might be. So think about who you're gonna put in charge in your stokvel and how you're actually gonna compensate them. So all of that is important. And then, understand what the membership is going to be. Are you guys going to be open? Are you open to taking anyone, or do you want it to remain closed? Is it just going to be family members, or is it just going to be very close friends? So make that clear from the beginning. But maybe when you're starting out, you might say, we just want to have 10 members, and then once we know what we're doing, we can gradually add people. That's also okay, but have an idea and all agree that you're okay with that, because now when adding more people onto the stokvel just adds a level of complexity, because now you need to consult more people and you've got more people to manage and all of that. So understand what it is you're trying to achieve and why you want to add more people, and what value that's going to bring. And understand as well what the entry and exit criteria are. What are the joining fees? Like, what happens if you join, the stokvel has been operating for a year? Do you need to catch up with the other members or not? So understand what is the criteria around joining. Is there anything you need to pay? Is there anything you need to do? Because I remember with our ladies stokvel, we said, okay, if you want to join our stokvel, you had to undergo property education, because we felt it was important. So if you were not willing to do that, then you were automatically then not going to become a member, because that was a requirement for our stokvel to join it. You have to undergo a property education, you have to visit property events, you have to read property books. So there was like serious entry criteria that you have to meet before joining. Whereas with Sakisiso, for example, we're not expecting that of our members. It's a purely passive investment. So understand what that looks like for the particular stokvel that you are joining. And what happens to when you want to leave? Is there a lock-in period? What if you want your money? Do you get a penalty for exiting early? How do you calculate? Let's say, for example, you've bought a property or you've been putting money in other investments. How do you then calculate what your value is worth at the point of exit? So that needs to be covered as well. I need to cover stuff like meetings. What happens? How often do you meet? What are the arrangements around that? Is it online? Is it physically? Once a all of so that would normally be covered in your constitution. And then around your finances, you need to understand what your contributions are. What happens if you miss a payment or you are late? Are there penalties? So all of that is also important. And then what do you expect from your members? Some stokvels have got purely passive members, whereas some expect them to do some sort of work. So understand, what is it that you're expecting your members to do. So, stokvels in South Africa are mostly, they are actually not a juristic entity, meaning that, they can't really transact in their own name. Like you can't go to a bank as a stokvel and apply for a bond. But what you can do is you can register as a particular entity. So you can decide as individuals, let's say there's 3 or 4 of you that have set up a property stokvel. You have a choice of either then going and registering the bond in all 4 of your names. I wouldn't do it if there's more than 3. I think 3 is a stretch already, but you could theoretically then go and register a bond in those people's names, because the challenge then is, what if someone leaves? You need to do transfer, you register a new bond, and so it gets more complicated. So you need to either look at using a company or a trust or a combination of both. So I would recommend that if that's something you're looking at, speak to the legal professionals who can assist you with the right structuring and the right advice, because it's not a one size fits all. Some stokvels are happy with just being a company, some are happy with being a trust, and some are happy with a combination of both, using a company and a trust. So that would then depend on what your particular strategy is. And the reason why you need to consider a structure is basically for tax purposes, because the entity that you choose will need to pay tax, whether that's a trust or the individuals or the company. So look at the most tax efficient structure for you when you're buying the property, when you're selling the property, when you're getting payouts and all of that, because there's tax implications. And then also understand in terms of protection. So what happens when a member is married in community of property and they get divorced, and their staff then wants a share of the action, or what happens if they get into debt and their creditors are like, so you've got this property stokvel thing going that's worth what, so they might be interested in getting those shares that you've got, So, or you could be dying, you could die, and then what happens to your assets and all of that. So all of those things you need to consider when you're choosing the right structure for you. So then, that's just around that. And so in terms of what your strategy is as a stokvel, like I said in the beginning, it all boils down to what your objectives are and your vision of what it is that you're trying to achieve. And you could have a short term and a medium term and a long term strategy. So for example, in most cases, a short term strategy might be just want to raise the money, because some stokvels are happy to take on debt and some are not. They say, you know what, why have a 20-year bond when we can just put money for 5 years and then buy a property after 5 years? There's nothing wrong with that. It's a choice that you guys make. But then you're losing out on leverage and other benefits of actually using debt, but anyway, that's a decision that you need to make as a group, and make sure that you're comfortable with either all cash or all debt, or a combination of both, to say maybe you put in a higher deposit, a 40% deposit or something along those lines. So understand what your short-term objectives are, and then what your medium term. Maybe let's say in the short term you just want to raise money. So in the short term you want the quickest way to make sure that your money grows as quickly as possible. So whether that's putting it in a money market account, or what's way, or anywhere else really that you want. So for the short term, and then in the long term, obviously then it's to buy the property, So understand that as well, and then understand how much time you've got. Some people don't want to wait for 5 years before they start seeing results. Some people are impatient, So understand, what the timelines are, what the expectations are before people expect to start seeing results. Because I mean, if you're expecting someone, especially with those kinds of stokvels where you're buying each other properties, you might find that there's 10 of you, and you might only get your 10 after 15 years or something, which means you have to be very patient. So to understand what the time what the time is, and then also consider your experience and your skills, and like I said, in terms of what it is that you can do, and whether you would like to look at cash or debt financing. So I think that's it then from my side. I hope that I covered everything. I'm gonna scroll up now and just see what some of the questions have been when I've been talking. And Lucy's B says, you got an award in first year of implementing the concept. Yes, Sis B. We started in June, actually till July, July, August, September, October, November. 5 months we got an award. So yes. So Usia says, interesting. Yes, absolutely. And then Tuli says, wow, business orientated stokvels. Absolutely. Tuli, absolutely. And then, wow, 24 million in 5 years. Absolutely. That's amazing. I think I actually know which stokvel it is, but yeah, I think I know, but yeah. And then if you can dream it, you can achieve it. More than a million, 100%. And then Theo says, hi, Slee, I hope I'm not jumping the gun. Okay, yes, I have a question. Theo then wants to know, please explain how you guys split the profits made from properties bought in the instance of stokvels having 2 units rented out or owned by 5 members. So you would need to decide what your criteria is, because some people might want to put in more money, others might want to put less. So it also boils down to how you guys have set up your constitution. In some instances, you must say everybody must take out the same amount, like it's 2,000 Rand for everybody. Or you could say, we put a unit or a number of shares per 1,000 Rand or per 100 Rand. So you can say each 100 Rand is 1 share or something like that. Then it just works how you calculate the returns a lot more easier, especially if the amounts that people are contributing are not the same. So if the amounts are not the same, then you need to find a way of making it equitable for everyone. But if you're keeping it simple and everybody pays the same amount, then it's just then an equal distribution. And that is how I would answer that question. Magdalene Gunene says, can you give an example of how a stocked to buy each member a primary house would operate? Okay, what I would advise on that one of buying each other properties, right, is don't just go and put the person's, like, for example, let's say there's 10 of us, right? And I want to buy other properties. So we start with me, obviously, right? We contribute, I buy my house, I pull out of the stock. For what you guys gonna do? You've registered the bond in my name, right? What I would recommend in that instance is rather put it into like a trust or a company, and then have the member pay rent into that, because now that's actually adding more money into the pool. Until then, all the members have had their property. So none of the members would actually own the properties in their own name. It would be in the company's name. Then only once everybody has had their property, then transfer it to the individual members. Because to just say we'll contribute and buy the property first, what guarantee you have that I'm going to continue the stokvel once I've had my house registered at the deeds office under my name? So rather put it into some sort of an entity until all the houses are bought, and then start the distribution or the transfer out of the company or trust into the individual members' names. So that's how I would say you could handle that. And or alternatively, the easy one is just to say people are we're gonna save all the money and then buy all the properties at once, or maybe we'll save 20% deposit or 30% deposit, whatever your objectives are for that particular stokvel. Unkonzo says, can a stokvel invest in your property stokvel? Yes, they can. Stevens want to know, what are the tax implications of your property stokvel? The tax implications is that we pay interest on our members, and interest is taxable. So you would need to speak to your tax professional who can advise you in terms of how to then put that into your tax returns and all of that. But yeah, I think there is a limit in terms of what the you start paying tax after you earn a certain amount of tax. But yeah, that's up to you, and how you, with your other investments where you're earning interest, you will then need to disclose that to the revenue man. And Uzolisa wants to know, hi Slee, with your particular stokvel, what are the terms for joining financial and others? I'm sorry if I missed it. I'm curious since you are still open for membership. Okay, so the terms for joining is really, we don't have terms for joining. As long as you would like to be a part of us, you are more than welcome to. We're not expecting you to do any work. You are purely going to be a passive investor. So we have two options. You can make a monthly contribution or a once-off contribution. And Ulrato Siakamela says, hi Silindile. Oh, it's a bit of a long one. From a starting point for people who are taking action from this conference, of course. Also part of the homework we will do. Apart from joining your stokvel, what are your top 3 most important points that you've experienced so far? It's basically having like-minded people is the most important one, you know, and because now that makes sure that you guys are working towards the same objectives, and you are united in your action, and then it's having a strong vision in terms of why you are doing it, you know. That's been another important one. And also just partnerships. You know, you don't have to do everything on you by yourself. That's another big one that I've learned. It's just all about partnerships. You don't have to be the starting of everything. You can, where you don't know, it's okay to partner with people who do know. So those are some of the things that I've taken away. And that, you know, the stokvels have got incredible power, guys, and I think we've been sitting on this for many years now, and now that we are actually having the awakening, let's us make the most of it, you know, and start using, because I mean, like I said earlier, 49 billion rand that just goes towards groceries once a month. You know, why don't we rather, you know, maybe pull together, collaborate, and go straight to Unilever and whatever else and buy the stuff ourselves, while we're not having, you know, business conversations around how we can actually extract more value for our stokvels, you know. There's someone who asked me how our stokvel works at a high level. So I'm going to quickly cover it. So basically, we're passive investors. We've partnered with M5 Property Addicts. I think you guys might have seen Rita and TJ. They've already done their presentations and all of that. So we, as a stokvel crowdfund, we raise the money. They then find the properties for us. They manage it. They basically, from a tenant placing perspective as well as from a property maintenance perspective. So from out of that, we then get, you know, monthly income. So and we pay that monthly income to our members on a monthly basis. So you invest and you immediately start seeing the returns. You don't have to wait for 5 years before you start seeing something. So, and like I said, we also invest in various properties throughout the country. So, you know, we're always having fresh deals to invest in, which is quite awesome. So yeah, that's what I would say is at a high level. Okay, I think that's it, guys. My time is up. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you for the engagement. I've had fun, and if you guys need to get hold of me, you can. I'm on Facebook as Silindile. You can just reach out to me, ask any questions, and yeah, I'm happy to assist. From a Sakisizwe perspective, you can just like our Facebook page, Sakisizwe Property Stokvel. Our website is www.sakisizwepropertystokvel.co.za. And yes, and we're on Twitter as well. Yes. Thank you, everyone, and have a beautiful evening.